Father Jet Villarin, former Secretary Singson, former Secretary Lutilia, ladies and gentlemen, mga kapwa ko Pilipino, magandang umaga po. Una sa lahat, let me first thank Dean Ron Mendoza, Dr. Joseph Yap, and Dean Tony Lavinia for this kind invitation. I'm very honored to deliver this keynote in honor of Father Jet Villarin's 3-term presidency at the Ateneo de Manila University. I may not be an Atenean, but I share Father Jet's interest on our global climate system. And of course, Ateneo de Manila University School of Government and the Manila Observatories work on this issue, including, of course, on energy. Father Jet is not only an able university administrator, he is also a climate scientist. Father Jet's work with the IPCC has landed him, along with several colleagues all over the world, the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007, an honor he shared with then Vice President Al Gore. The following year, 2008, was momentous for me personally. It was the year I left the country for postgraduate studies, and it was also the year I started my work on the climate, albeit not on understanding the basic climate science, but on explicating its policy and governance, a work that I am continuing today as an assistant professor at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So 2008 was 2007, 2008 were watershed years for my own personal development as a climate scholar. Today I will be talking about energy transitions. So energy transition offers us one way, indeed the most important way, to address the key driver of anthropogenic or human-made climate change, that of greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector. This transition encompasses the ways we generate electricity that provide lights to our homes, power our industries, and make the movements of people and goods possible. All this has to transition. All these energy services has to shift their energy sources to more sustainable and renewable energy resources, from wind, from water, from sunlight, and in our case in the Philippines, from the heat of the earth or geothermal energy. Obviously, we still do not know when COVID-19 will become history or whether it will indeed become one. The possibility of living in a world alongside this virus is indeed not a remote one. Regardless, the present pandemic has fractured the ways we live now and most especially in the future. This tragedy will have profound effects for future generations. Decisions made today will lock us in the many years to come. So these decisions include the ways in which we are transitioning towards cleaner, sustainable, reliable, and affordable energy, especially in the context of another important emergency, that of the climate crisis. And of course, doing this all together as we also contribute to meeting the global agenda of sustainable development for all. Indeed, there is now a collective and general understanding that the changing climate has ushered us into a planetary crisis, an emergency that scientists like Father Jet have persistently warned us during the last 10 to 20 years. This transition, however, will not only work towards mitigating the impacts of climate change for future generations. Indeed, that shift towards more renewables also mean that we can harvest a number of targets in the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. In my talk today, I will focus on how we can envisage that a just, a fair, and an inclusive energy transition in the Philippines. I will start by looking quickly at how renewable energy fared during the first quarter of this year, at a time when lockdowns were instituted not only in the Philippines but all over the world. As you can see from this slide, we see that electricity demand have actually been dropping to Sunday levels under conditions of lockdown all over the world. The dramatic reduction in terms of electricity demand can be seen in the services and industry, but these are only partly offset by increasing use of energy in our homes. However, of all these sectors, the service-based economies are suffering the most. This slide here shows that for the first time in half a century, low-carbon technologies are overtaking coal as the leading source of electricity in 2019, and they are moving further ahead in 2020. They meaning solar PV, wind, and other renewables. This slide here shows the global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions are set to fall nearly 8% this year to their lowest level in a decade. Contributing most to that reduction is reduced use in coal. Experience, however, suggests that after a certain or a key crisis, large rebound in terms of emissions is also likely. So it will not be unusual if we ever get out of the pandemic, we will see emissions shooting upwards. But the during also this period, the share of renewable energy penetration in the United Kingdom was at a record high of 45%. In Germany, it was 52%, and in the entire European Union, it was 48%. I don't know what the figures are in the Philippines or some other countries in comparative countries in Asia and the Pacific, but I assume it's almost the same. What can we expect for the future of renewables globally then? Some observers say that it will be more likely growth, though it will not be as fast as we expect it to be. Renewables will grow, they will indeed grow, while coal and gas will continue to decline. As shown in Europe, for example, it is possible today to operate power systems with high renewables. However, it will be, again, as I've said, slower. Renewable energy capacity additions have also dropped somehow. Electric vehicle cells are also down. Global supply chain for renewable energy technologies, so talking about wind turbines, solar PV, have been disrupted, considering that our modest manufacturing capacity in the Philippines is largely dependent on Chinese manufacturers for majority of our solar cells and modules. While it is clear that the impacts of the pandemic on energy transition is not yet set, we have already seen how the crisis reveal in terms of the importance of diversification, of integration, and sustainability of energy generation. We now have to buttress up the ways we think about the future of our energy transition governance arrangements. Having said that, resiliency of our energy systems have to be front and center among these new considerations. In planning the post-pandemic recovery, energy transition should be a catalytic force for rebooting our economy while redirecting energy in the direction of more resilience. For example, we need more health infrastructure to manage the health emergency that can be energy resilient through decentralized renewable energy. Here, I would like to mention ASEP-CELLs' ongoing work to build capacities of our institutions and increase public engagement on the imperatives of energy transition in the Philippines. Energy resiliency is also taking the core of my current research, including with my collaborators at the University of the Philippines, Diliman College of Engineering. So as the COVID-19 pandemic continue to affect our lives and our livelihoods, our insecure situation also continues. For all the extreme uncertainties today, we know for certain that pandemics pass. Yes, it will pass. What the pandemic has shown us is that we could no longer remain oblivious of other systemic risks. Our complacency to address the risks to our planetary environment posed by thoughtless economic development has to end. While we could not force many Filipinos to think about the climate emergency at a time when finding food remains an urgency, paying a bit more attention to respecting our planetary boundaries and to stop pretending that they do not exist have to be in the agendas of good government. As soon as the immediate crisis has passed, and especially when attention moves to reviving our economy, I think that's the opportune time to ensure that just energy transition from accelerating renewable energy deployments to cleaner transport to smart infrastructure is at the heart of the stimulus. I would like to underline some ways how might this may be achieved. Pursuing a 100% electrification of all energy service, so energy service from electricity to transport and industry is key. And let me go back quickly to energy resilience because 100% renewable energy system also speaks of resilience. And 100% renewable energy is technically plausible for our context here in the Philippines. A resilient energy system is about a lot of things. It means utility scale storage, electric vehicle smart charging, renewable energy to heat, AI, artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain, renewable energy mini grids for our many off-grid islands, and of course, super grids for our three major grids. A resilient energy system is also about new business models. It includes aggregators, P2P electricity trading, and energy as a service, as well as community ownership models. And a resilient energy system is also about market design, including time of use tariffs, market integration, and time of use distributed renewable energy. A resilient energy system is also about system operation, which include the future role of distribution system operators, advanced forecasting of variable renewable energy, and innovative operation of pumped hydro storage. While supporting renewable energy projects is a must, addressing the structural issues that is holding back renewables deep penetration into grids in our country, however, is much more important. And I have to stress here the structural impediments to renewable energy transition in the Philippines. We have people from government as well as from the energy industry with us today. I assume to have a keen understanding of these impediments. I know they know what these challenges are about, and they also know the ways by which we can address these barriers. I will not belabor myself to repeat what our friends, what our advocate friends in the anti-coal movement and the movement towards 100% renewable energy Philippines have been pushing hard for many years to make the case for energy transition in a renewable energy-rich country. Instead, let this be a pleading to our friends in government and in the energy sector to do the right, the moral, and the ethical thing, and that is to process energy transition as quickly as we can. Going back to stimulus, so as we design these packages, it is also incumbent for a good and a thoughtful government to ensure that no bailouts should be made available to industries and business models that are not viable in the coming low-carbon world. So these include low-cost airlines, coal-fired power generation, and the uneconomic operation in oil and gas. Yes, I plead guilty with regards to air travel. My line of work had demanded for it. But if we are to take the climate emergency seriously, we could not return to that abnormal way of life. And I'm not returning to that way of life. The future of transport for the Philippines is electric. Electric vehicles powered by renewables would mean that coal-fired power generation has to stop, and there should be a moratorium on new and planned coal-fired power plants. The studies after studies, we were shown that 100% renewable energy-powered world, including for the Philippines, is possible, and the technologies to reach that world are available. However, the transition is not only a technical and an engineering endeavor. It is at best political, social. Policy should therefore be aligned with the thrust of the transition. The same is true with financing and capacity development. Indeed, the education of our future generations has to be geared towards preparing and mitigating the risks of the climate crisis and other future emergent risks. Most importantly, we have to address the vulnerabilities of our people. The pandemic wipes out household incomes, ensuring that our vulnerable populations, and there are many of them in our society, the poorest amongst us, the people or persons with disabilities, our seniors, the LGBTs, the indigenous peoples, and many others, they should receive their necessary social and economic support to shield their livelihoods from the negative impacts, and this should be non-negotiable. Our vulnerable people have been suffering from climate impacts the most, including the lack of energy access, and we see them not only in remote off-grid islands in the Philippines, but even in urban Philippines. Elderly people also suffer from air pollution. Their suffering could have been avoided if fossil fuel subsidies were instead used for health and for education. As we look forward into stimulus packages, we should demand jobs that are created in low carbon sectors. And this is not only in energy, it is also in transport. It is also in making our urban places green and sustainable. Sustainable development for all can only be achieved if we take good care of those who have least in life. And these are the most vulnerable. And this is what I mean by just transition. You have to remember that Filipinos would not prioritize climate action if they do not benefit equitably from the subsequent recovery. Again, the key word here is benefit, and that has to be shared fairly and equitably across. If we are ever to provide subsidies, for example, to our airline industry, it can we get them into the right track on sustainability, especially since public money will be spent to support them? First condition, if we ever have to do this, is that there should be no layoff. It is unacceptable for companies to get bailouts while laying off people, right? So in closing, a just transition to a largely, if not 100% renewable energy powered Philippines is not only for engineers, not only for economists, not only for entrepreneurs, and not only for people in government. It requires a whole of society effort. Again, energy transition has a climate imperative, but at the same time, it has a sustainable development imperative. Enlisting everybody's contribution is a must to make that future happen. When this pandemic is over, every Filipino should have something magnificent to look forward to. And I guess, and I think, and I argue that energy transition is something that is magnificent to look forward to. Then after that, like Dante Alighieri, we can leave hell and again behold the stars. The future is in our hands. Let us move in the right direction. Madamo gid nga salamat. Thank you so much for your kind attention.